it's not the content that's the problem, it's the gluttony that's the problem. And so
Mm,
when we look at certain foods, for example, it's not the food. Food for is good for you. We need it to nourish our body, but it's not that. It's the overconsumption of that, right? That's where gluttony
mm,
is. Sleep is another example. It's something that we need to do. We need to sleep. We need to rest.
that's
We're
right.
supposed to do that. But sloth is a problem.
Mhm.
See the difference? And so I think that that's one of the things when you say, well, do you go back to that? The idea is it's not, don't get wrapped up in what the thing is. Realize what the actual sin, the nature behind that is. That's what we're really
Got it.
trying to work through.
That was just a good exercise of like being reminded that it is about the gluttony or the sloth. It's not about, yeah, food in and of itself,
It's
not a
not bad.
problem.
Yep. Those YouTube shows that you're watching in and of themselves, not a problem. It's
Yeah,
it's the way that it affects your spirit. That's where it
right.
becomes a problem.
Welcome to the Christ Centered Stewardship Podcast with your hosts, Maria Casillas and Nino Villa. Christ Centered Stewardship is a ministry of new money habits designed to equip believers to steward everything God has given them, including their time, talent, and treasure in ways that bring Him honor, glory, and praise. You can join our growing community on Facebook and submit your questions to podcast at newmoneyhabits.com. Now, to begin today's episode, here is Maria Casillas and Nino Villa.
Maria, I did something that I don't think normal people do.
What?
I love the face for those who are only listening and like, wait, what? I mean, Maria, your face was priceless. Absolutely priceless. So I sat down some time ago and looked at kind of like, what are the activities that fill up my week? And I started to map those out into different categories. And the big categories are things like sleep, work, um, what I call kind of like kingdom focused activities, things that where I spend time and say, God, work on me and through me. And then I kind of bucketed everything else out into leisure. And you and I are looking at the graphic, and my leisure time is somewhere around 28% of my week. And it just got me really wrestling with the question like, how to steward this gift of time well. And I
Yeah.
imagine a lot of our listeners, you know, probably struggle with something similar from time to time. Like, am I stewarding the gift of time well? What does that even look like?
Yeah, well, I know that our listeners and even our viewers can't see the actual chart right now, but I'm looking at it, I'm smiling because it's almost 30% of your chart. And I just, knowing what I know about you, I doubt that you're actually spending that much time in leisure. Um, so I'd love to see a breakdown of that sometime. You don't have to obviously give that to us today, but I do think that you're
Yeah.
right. Most people don't do that. And there are probably many who do. The successful ones are probably the ones who do this a little more often. I do not do this. So, and maybe I should, maybe I will have to do that now. Just to kind of take a real inventory of how do I spend my day and my time and to I think I would probably get lost in the minutia if I tried to really break it down too granularly, but I think that I think this would be a good thing to break it down a little bit and just kind of see. Anyway, I think the idea of how do we steward our time well is really, really good. And I'll just tell you that right now, like we're right in the thick of Lent. So I'm Catholic, and as Catholics, we honor Lent, which is a time for us to really just kind of like look at what are the things that distract us from our relationship with Jesus. And it's a reminder that we came from dust, and to dust we will return. And that's really what a lot of this is about, and in preparation for the death, the resurrection of Jesus. And so we in our family, like to try to talk about what will be something that we can like release, to give up. And we always do some sort of fasting in the area of food. And we also will do sometimes a fast, if you will, in something that we're trying to let go of, whether it's a bad habit or something that is just a distraction for us. And in our family, it's ironic that you bring this up today. One of the things that we talk about is, what do we do with our idle time? And so I don't know if you included idle time in your leisure, in your graphic here, but that's one. No, you did not include that?
Well, I
Okay.
mean, yeah, like it's interesting, right? Because like that word idle, I think it takes a little bit of each one of us determining like what is that definition, right? So like my leisure category is a big bucket, and there's certainly idle time in there. But I think I used the word leisure because one of the things I was wrestling with is when you get to a certain kind of point in your day, is it okay to doom scroll social media? Not something I do very often, but like my wife and I will sit down and like watch TikToks together or whatever. So I specifically use the word leisure because I'm like, at what point, not that you've earned it or deserved it, but it's just like, hey, I have been super productive today. I've done all these other things, and this is how I want to spend some of my leisure time. And do I need to feel guilty about that? So that's the only reason why I wouldn't necessarily use the word idle, but
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean it's not in there.
Yeah, no, totally get that. And I agree that we are able to have some idle time. I mean, that we have to. I mean, sleeping is kind of idle. Like, we're not doing
Idle
anything.
adjacent.
I mean, that's where so much of our creativity and such happens, because, we're turning our body off so that our minds can keep going. But
Mm.
I do think it's really interesting. It's just the idea of wasted time. And so, like, when we talk about budgets, oftentimes people are very anti-spending, oh, I can't spend on this and I can't spend on this. And I always sit with my clients and I'm like, look, spending is fine. We just don't want to waste the money. So it's like, if you have identified things that you want to be able to spend on, whether that's your money or your time in this instance, that's great. It's just when it's that unplanned and sort of wasted time. So I will just have a little bit of a confession here. I recently downloaded a game on on my phone. I don't know why I did it. I always used to just make fun of people who did it. And now I find myself actually opening up that game when I have, quote unquote, nothing else to do. And I'm using quotes on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It is easily, and if I was smart, I would just say, "Oh, I'm going to open this and play it for 10 minutes." Now that's just a little bit more of a leisure thing. That's the idle time. But when it goes past that 10 minutes and it gets into 20 minutes or 30 minutes, or it's like, "Oh, but I almost got that one. Now I got to try again because I didn't get that one." Then I start to recognize that it's taking over my mind. It's more of like that addiction quality, if you will. And so
Mm.
that's the part that I'm talking about. What are those things in our lives that are doing that? And so it got me to thinking, like, how do we steward our time well? The time that's not planned, because a lot of times, if you think about this, our work is sort of planned for us. Our sleep is sort of built in. So there's not a lot of thinking that has to go around that. It's the
Mm.
other time that we have that it really is a test of our ability to steward that time well.
Yeah. And I love even just the fact that we get to use similar language like spend.
Mm.
So we spend money, we spend time.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things I've been wrestling with is, am I spending time in ways that bring God honor, glory, and praise? And I think that led to me kind of formulating this chart, is just kind of like looking at, where am I spending time? And is there a category or an area where I'm spending too much time and another area where I'm not spending enough time? Um, but even before we started recording, you encouraged me to break down that leisure into uh, a little bit more specifics. And I'm going to do that because I want to kind of look at like what is making up that category. But that's neither here nor there. I think the real point is, we talked last week about knowledge is power. And when we kind of know when we can take an inventory of how we're spending time, we
Mhm.
can then assess and make an informed decision about like, what do we want to do to adjust that? Now, earlier you said, during Lent, you're giving up things. You're trying to maybe rid yourself of a bad habit, and you are more the behavioral psychologist than I am.
Sure.
I get it a little bit, but I'm curious to know your take on this. Like, can somebody truly stop doing something, or is it more about they replace the thing they do with something else?
That's a great question, especially when it comes to time, because you have a certain amount of it in a day. So if you give something up, you will likely replace that with something else just by
Right.
default. Even if you're not talking about behaviorally, it has to be replaced with something else because the time doesn't stop. It stays, continuing to go. And so I think that there is either going to be an intentional replacement or there's going to be a default replacement. And so I don't know if you're looking for like what that thing would be replaced with. So in the case of like our family, for example, if you find yourself going, oh, I want to be watching television. That's one of my daughter's things. Is like that is her draw. I want to watch TV. I want to watch TV. I'm like, oh, child. Um, she's been like that since she was so little, and getting her to just be able to sit in boredom has been quite the parenting feat for us. But in her case, it's like if you have that desire and you are saying no to that desire, are you asking, do you fill that with something else? It
Yeah, I think in part my question was a little bit rhetorical in nature for like the listeners, like, hey, what would is it just simply like I'm going to stop doing something, or is it more to the point like I'm going to replace that with something? And then I love to fill in rhetorical questions with like just examples of things that we've experienced that will give them an opportunity to just think about like, oh, yeah, yeah, I can't just stop doing that. I definitely need to replace, and here's a healthier thing I could be replacing it with.
Yeah, so I was actually gonna say when deciding what to replace it with, you just kind of want to look at what's the end goal. Like what is the purpose for you doing that thing? So if in the event that we're talking, during Lent, that if it's to grow closer to Christ, then you would replace that bad habit, if you will, with something that is going to help you to grow closer. So maybe you say, you know what, today I'm not going to play this game. I'm going to spend this 10 minutes in the word instead, or I'm going to go to adoration. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but okay. So I'm going to go do that. I'm going to intentionally go and fill that with something that helps to meet that end goal. But even if you don't do that intentionally, the idea here is that it's going to be filled with something. So trying to make sure it's not filled then with another bad habit that's just going to replace the old one.
Yeah, and I think we see the principle of that in fasting, right? So Jesus talks about when you fast, never if, right? Like
Mhm.
when you fast, and of course in the context of food, because he also talks about how he is the bread of life, and how we do not live by bread alone, and but we live by every word that proceeds from the Father's mouth. And so this idea of fasting, and I love the idea of like when you're going to fast from something that's not food, include food. Include
Mhm.
food. Like deprive your body, because it 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 will do something so amazing for you spiritually, but there are also incredible physical benefits to it as well. But so as you're abstaining from that, it is like, what am I going to replace it with? And so the principle is found in scripture that when I'm fasting from food and possibly even like water and drinks, it's so that I can free myself up to spend more time in prayer. The thing anytime I'm fasting and I feel the hunger pain, that is my cue. It's time to pray. It's time to be in prayer. It's just a gentle reminder that, like, this is why I'm abstaining from food, so that I can spend more time in prayer and in the word. And so I like that the principle is kind of set for us that it is this replacement thing. And so thinking about like, I know that when the last time I fasted, it was also like I need to stop consuming as much YouTube content as I do, right? Like a lot of time in my idle or leisure time, it is I'm watching that stuff, which is interesting because my feed is filled with other believers sharing incredible stories, or they're sharing sermons, whatever it is, right? So it's like, you would think like, hey, this is good content. But to your point, I find that like the 5 minutes turns into 10, the 10 turns into 20, a half hour later, I'm still like scrolling, and this is just ridiculous. So part of the fasting was I need to stop consuming as much of that content. And I had to ask myself though, like, but what are you going to replace it with? Because if you don't determine that now, you're going to find yourself right back into the same cycle where, after, because during like the fast, if it's a 1-day fast, a 3-day fast, whatever that is, during that time, it's pretty easy. Once you break that fast, it's like, am I just going to slip right back in to the same things that I was trying to break?
I just want to go back to what you said about when you were like doing YouTube, but it's good content, right?
Yes.
I just want to go back to what you said about when you were like doing YouTube, but it's good content, right?
Yes.
It's not the content that's the problem. It's the gluttony that's the problem. And so when we look at certain foods, for example, it's not the food. Food is good for you. We need it to nourish our body. But it's not that. It's the overconsumption of that, right? That's where gluttony is. Sleep is another example. It's something that we need to do. We need to sleep. We need to rest. We're supposed to do that. But sloth is a problem. See the difference? And so
Yes.
I think that that's one of the things when you say, well, do you go back to that? The idea is it's not, don't get wrapped up in what the thing is, realize what the actual sin, the nature behind that is. That's what we're really trying to work through.
That was just a good exercise of like being reminded that it is about the gluttony or the sloth. It's not about, food in and of itself, not a problem.
Bad. Yep. Those YouTube shows that you're watching in and of themselves, not a problem. It's the way that it affects your spirit. That's where it becomes a problem. All it is a 40-day sacrifice. It is that 40-day reminder of, when Jesus was in the desert for 40 days and he was tempted. And so you are tempted on a regular basis to engage in or to indulge in that particular thing. And then you are very intentional with, no, I'm not going to do that today. I'm not going to do that for this 40 days. And another little tidbit that you may or may not know is that the 40 days is actually outside of Sundays. And so on Sundays that you are actually able to break your fast because of, that's the Lord's Day. And so it is something that it's not intended to be like a diet where you give up this thing and then you never see it again, right? It is an intentional, I am doing this as a sacrifice. And a lot of the times when you see like that chocolate thing, it's like what a lot of kids will start out, just to try to see what this is like and how that all works. But there's also, the fast from meat every Friday during Lent. And then on Ash Wednesday, it's a full day fast as it is on Good Friday. So it's not just a, I'm gonna give up this tiny little thing, but the meaning behind it is what I just described.
If we're good, let's move into our Ask the Coaches question of the week. Because we have a pretty interesting post to the community that I saw that I just was like, hey, like I kind of want to address this because I think this post is more about addressing kind of the mindset behind something rather than the physical like do or don't. So I'll read the whole thing and then we'll take a look at it. Now it's posted by somebody anonymously. It says, I have a dilemma. I'm neurodivergent, and last year I visited Disneyland for the first time. I bought the perfect pen for my job, the Dream Pen. It brings me joy daily, and I am so emotionally attached to it now, also because it brings me back to happy memories from last year. So now I fear anxiety if I ever lost it, or if I'm not able to use it until I retire. See, this is a parenthetical statement. See, you were warned about my mind from the start. Now, do I buy another one as a replacement just in case? I know it is not necessary because I already have it, and it's a limited collection. Is this ridiculous? And this ridiculous thing is just giving me a headache. So I wanted to address it because it really speaks to the way we think in terms of like how we steward our finances, right? It is evident that that's what this person is really wrestling with, is the way they're thinking about how they manage the money that they have. So I wanted to address it from that perspective.
Hmm. I am seeing the emotional attachment that this person is giving to an inanimate object. That's what I'm seeing is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And he or she does start by saying that I am neurodivergent. Um, Aren't we all?
Right?
In some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
No, but in all seriousness, I'm the mom of a diagnosed neurodivergent child, and so but as a mom, I get this, but I think sometimes that's used as like a justification for doing things that we know aren't even logical. And so in this case, I mean, here's what stuck out to me. The extremes are being thrown out here. It says it's
Mm-hmm.
the dream pen. Okay, that's fine. Brings me joy daily. That's interesting. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and then I understand that it brings back happy memories, but technically, even if the pen stopped working, it could sit on a desk and still bring those memories back. So that's not really a problem. But finally, the idea of if I ever lost it or I am not able to use it until I retire, that's a lot of pressure for a pen. Do you know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? So it's almost as if, I mean, it was put out there so strongly, like these terms are just so unrealistic that it's almost as if she's just looking for permission to go and buy a second pen. And so I don't know what you think about that. It doesn't, that's what I see as I read through that.
Two words that you use that I think really sum a lot of this up is justification and searching for permission. Justification and permission. This person's an adult. They can do what they want with their money. It's a $25 pen. If you want to spend $25 on the pen, you're going to do those things, right? So however you might justify that, or if you're looking for permission. But as you said, there is like this emotional tie to an inanimate object that is just a small red flag of like, don't be careful how much value you put into an inanimate object. You also kind of said that it's a lot of pressure for a pen, right? Like this poor pen has to live up to like these really high standards. It is a little bit concerning from that perspective. But I think at the top I said, I think this is in part about like, she's obviously wrestling with whether or not this is a wise money decision. And it's $25. $25 is not going to make or break this person's world. So I get the sense that he or she is just wrestling with, am I just being utterly ridiculous? And whether or not I think that's a subjective opinion. I think it's like, ask yourself, like, how does wrestling with this, especially at such a small dollar amount, like, what is it saying about your overall financial stewardship? That's like, I'm wrestling with whether or not to buy a $25 pen to have a backup because of an emotional thing. It's very interesting.
I think another important thing here, Nino, is that this comes from the group of the no spend challenge group. And so this individual is wrestling with, do I spend or do I not spend? But even if we didn't know that it came from that group, I would still say, just based on the merits of the post itself, it's obvious that that's what this is about because of the justification and that desire for permission. And I think that that's one of the reasons that I don't love those types of challenges, just to throw that out there, is that it forces us. And I also don't like the words needs and wants when we talk about budgeting. And this is exactly why I don't love that language. It's because if you believe that you need something in order to buy or or spend on that thing, then you find yourself with very creative ways to justify why that's a need. And that's really what's happening here. This person knows that in this moment when she's part of a no spending challenge, of course she would never go and buy a $25 pen. Of course not. Why would she do that? But she's not thinking right now. She's thinking about the future. What if I lose this? What if it doesn't last for 25 years until I retire? So she's finding ways to turn this into a need, because I'm guessing that some way, somehow in this challenge, people are allowing themselves to purchase needs. Do you see what I'm saying? So
Yep.
psychologically, we can drum up all sorts of things. We are made in the image of God, which means that we are creative like he is. And man, do we use that to our own detriment sometimes. And that's what I think this poster is really trying to do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But it was nice of you to assume that she's just trying to steward it all very, very well.
Well, I want to give everybody the benefit of the
I
doubt,
know.
right? I will share that Scripture does remind us. Jesus himself says, "Do not store up treasures here on earth where rust and moths destroy, but to store up your treasures in heaven." And so,
Yes, and joy comes from the Lord, not
that's right.
not the pen.
That's right.
I just
That's
want
right.
to give that slight reminder.
Absolutely. One of the things I like to remind anybody who's willing to listen is, you've heard the old adage, you can't take it with you, right?
Yeah.
And obviously the context there is when you die, you can't take your house, your car, your material belongings with you. But it got me thinking one day about, well, what do I get to take with me? I get to take memories and relationships. Memories and relationships. So continue to invest in those. That's going to be the challenge of the week. The challenge of this week is to invest in your relationships and creating memories with those you love.
Challenge accepted.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Christ Centered Stewardship Podcast. Follow us on your favorite social media platform for more encouragement and support. And until next time, may the Lord keep you in perfect peace as you set your sight on Jesus.